All right. And then the final story for today comes from hackread.com. And the title here is FBI and CISA warn of ghost ransomware, a threat to firms worldwide. Uh, I thought this was interesting because this was a very contra example of something that is apparently becoming an acute problem, yet is going against some of the trends that we've talked about in recent shows, where recently we talked about how the trend is moving away from encrypting and more towards stealing data because it's the defensive techniques and capabilities of a lot of organizations are getting to the point where they're having less success with encrypting systems and data, and so they're relying more on exfiltrating data and holding that for ransom. But this is an example of a threat actor who is coming on strong, and uh, while they are claiming to have stolen all of your data and offering it for ransom, in practice, they apparently steal just enough to convince you that they have your data, and to help motivate you to pay. But the main damage that they're performing is actually the encryption of your system.
I get that doing just enough to get paid. I understand that fully.
Yes, yes, yes. So this particular threat actor, uh, their initial compromise is kind of boring. They're using vulnerable externally for internet facing systems. So things like Cold Fusion, um, FortiGate, management interfaces, Microsoft Exchange servers, SharePoint, and on and on and on. So they're attacking known vulnerable software where there are exploits available, and then that's their initial point of entry, and then from there they will move laterally. They rely very heavily on Cobalt Strike. And so anybody who's had experience with Cobalt Strike, either as a red teamer or as a blue teamer trying to clean up after it, knows that it's a pretty damn insidious piece of code that has very broad capabilities, and this particular threat actor apparently is making very good use of those capabilities to do things like steal credentials, and again move laterally throughout the organization, and ultimately push out the encryptor to your fleet of systems. So again, from a if you zoom way out, it looks like every other ransomware actor that we've seen. I think that one of the novelties here is that they are claiming to have stolen your data, but they probably actually haven't stolen most of your data. And then they also have a very heavy reliance on Cobalt Strike, which on the one hand is very sophisticated, and if you're not looking for it, super hard to detect. But on the other hand, if you are looking for it, can be fairly is detectable. So I would say at this point, if you aren't instrumented to detect Cobalt Strike in your environment, you're missing an opportunity there.
Yeah, and there's plenty of tutorials out there and IOCs to look for.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what this highlights to me is that there's no one universal truth of what bad actors are up to. You've got tons of different threat actors with different approaches, different techniques, different ideas, different efficacy, different capabilities. Some work better than others. It's something we haven't talked a lot about lately at all, is attribution. Attribution was always the thing I always frowned against, and I always felt was a bit of a shell game in terms of all these cybersecurity companies and central reporting agencies always want to throw some attribution on it. It's this group or it's that group. And in theory, that will give you information about their TTPs and their common stuff. But I always felt like as a blue teamer, I don't care. Like, I don't, they could change their tactics in a heartbeat. Who they are doesn't change my job. I still have to defend against whatever the entire fleet of common tactics are. And if I knew ahead of time that this threat actor with this set of techniques was going to come after me, yeah, I could do something about it. But you never know who's going to come after you or who's probing around or who's attacking you. And who they are doesn't really change my job. I'm not trying to go get them arrested or, shut them down or, send Liam Neeson overseas with a certain set of skills to hunt them. So I always found the emphasis on attribution odd to me, but it is the way of the industry. And I am but a small fish in a very large industry who am just a mouse amongst the dancing elephants, as I like to say.
I think, I have perhaps a new and updated perspective on that a little bit. I think that
Please.
I think there is not one single reason why people focus on attribution. I think it's different personas of people have different reasons. And so I think corporate executives, like senior executives, want to be able to attribute it because they want the ability to pin it on some specific actor. Like, it wasn't like a nebulous bad person. It was like the Chinese intelligence agency or the North Koreans or like they want to be able to very specifically say that, because I think there's a view that takes some of the onus off of them as a victim and puts it more on the adversary. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm
That's
not going to
fair.
judge.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think
fair.
from an incident response perspective, if you know that you're being attacked by the bloody ferret or whatever bad threat actor name we come up with, um, you can and you have reasonable threat intelligence, it can help inform what you should look at next. It's not necessarily to like constrain you, but like, okay, I see evidence that it's this particular threat actor. I know that they also do X, Y, and Z. And so I'm gonna like scan my environment to see if I see any examples of X, Y, and Z. So I think it's a bit of an enabler on on accelerating incident response. It's not a panacea. It doesn't necessarily even change what the ultimate outcome is in terms of, like, you have to burn it all down anyway. That doesn't change, but it can help. You can help you get to a faster answer of like, where did they go, and how did they get from point A to point B, and whatnot. And of course, I think that the government is very interested in understanding, what threat actors are active, because they want to. We're seeing it in spades right now. Like, they want to have the ability to sanction entities, and having some, again, whether it's accurate or not, they want to have some sense of, like, we're having a huge problem with North Korean hackers attacking chemical companies in the US, and so that's going to drive some kind of a response. Anyway, I think there's I don't know that it provides like a lot of information in terms of prevention. Certainly, certainly, like, we should be looking at the different, which is one of the intentions of the show here, right? Is looking at the various and sundry techniques that threat actors are using. And I think, you know, it it is I think that there are some people who believe that, you know, what I should do is figure out like which threat actors are focused on my industry, and then I can look and see like how are those threat actors attacking companies like mine, and then I can help use that to justify investment to bolster our protections. But I think that one of the challenges that I've observed personally over the course of running the show, and as you know, being a CISO and managing like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of incidents, is that the adversaries are watching each other. They're reading these reports, the same ones that we're talking about. Like the garden variety threat actors are all reading the same stuff, and they're learning. Like they have an incentive to become better at their jobs too, because it makes them more money. And so, while yes, they may start off doing things in a very certain way, I think it's a creates a false sense of security if we rely too much on those, you know, kind of defined techniques associated with a particular threat actor, because we know that they're learning. This is a like a rapidly evolving space. And so if I think we ignore things to our detriment. We can't solve everything. I get that, right? But I really think we have to have a clear-eyed view of the modern tactics that threat actors generally are using, and try to distill that into a set of protections that we implement to the best of our ability in our organization. Sorry, that was a
Yeah.
like really long diatribe there.
No, it's good. I'm glad I sparked an interesting thought path for you, or at least I like to think I did. I don't know. I tend to agree with most of that. Um, I had a thought, but I've lost it now. I think the interesting thing for me is, oh, I remember. So part of what I hear you saying is that some threat actors may be learning from our show and listening when we talk about this stuff. So I think if that's true, they should up their Patreon donation a bit.
I'm with you. I mean, like yeah, yeah.
Just saying, if you're a bad actor and you're getting $1.4 billion from people's, you know,
You're deriving value from the
crypto.
show, whatever that means.
Call us. Well, let's work out. Let's work out something. I'm not saying we can be bought. I'm saying we can be rented. Anyway, no.
Yes.
No. In all seriousness, you're right. Like you need to understand what the bad actors are doing, and you need to understand how they do it and what a typical technique is, and a typical thing, especially affecting your industry. I guess where I start to go a little sideways is when people start to get really fancy with, oh, and it was this threat actor, and in fact, we think it was this person for this threat actor, and it was this. It's like, okay, that's cool, but it doesn't change my job. But you're right. Different stakeholders in this have different emphasis and different needs. And if I'm an executive talking to the press, it's nice for me to say this was a nation state attack out of China. Nothing I can do, right?
Yeah. Again, it doesn't
So
change for those of us who are down in the engine room. It doesn't change the gears and the levers that we're
right.
pulling, right? It doesn't. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
But I think it does help certain people with certain discussions, and I think that's why they're. And
Yeah.
by the way, I also think that there is an aspect of this that is driven by the security industry itself. Like
Sure.
that, you know,
Yeah.
there is I think there is, I'm struggling to put it into words, but I think that security companies benefit from, you know, optically from being able
Mm-hmm.
to write a highly prescriptive or highly definitive report on an attack that attributes it to some particular actor in some country, and if they have like names and driver's license picture is like even better, because then I think that creates an air of sophistication on the part of that company.
What's the downside? Who's going to tell them they're wrong?
Right.
Who could prove they're wrong? Right? Who, like, who's going to challenge you or in any way prove that you're wrong when you say this is fancy raccoon 74?
Well, other threat intelligence companies, obviously,
Maybe.
they have an incentive to say, oh, look, that the Jerry Intel company is, they put out this statement and it's just full of crap. And so I suspect there's a little bit of that, but and broadly speaking, you're right.
It's a safe prediction. It's a safe area to have low confidence but sound like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah. By the way, I have noticed when you read late, especially as of late, when you read reports that do put some attribution, they don't spend a lot of time on it. It's usually like one sentence, but they'll say something like, we have medium to low confidence that this
Yeah.
is, which
And
that carries a lot. That one sentence in like a 10-page report's carrying a lot of water.
yeah, no kidding. Well, and to be clear, I think the techs on the ground doing the hard work are doing good work. It's often the marketing and the sales folks that
Right.
overhype and blow this stuff out of proportion and destroy credibility.
Yeah. Yep. Having said that, a couple stories ago, we talked about the ESET report. I thought, for better or for worse, I thought they did a nice job, probably one of the better jobs of explaining their logic behind how they attributed it. Like, they didn't just say, and we think this is North Korea. Like they said, and here's why we think it's North Korea. It's because of we see, we know from other attacks on the laptop farm issue that we've talked about in the past, we see the same people being connected in the GitHub repositories. So like so it's reasonable. It's not 100% airtight. Could be faked, absolutely, but it's a reasonable assertion. And without them putting that out there, we would it would just kind of look like, well, they just, that I guess they thought it was coming from a North Korean IP address.
Well, the packets were labeled as coming from a Commodore 64, so
Oh, that's probably it.